the record button. Now I'm going to share my screen. Okay, how's that? Can we all see it? Okay, I see some nods. So great. Okay, so I'll introduce myself again, but my name is Kirsten Ramey. I'm the department's Marine Region Environmental Program Manager for the State Managed Finfish and Nearshore Ecosystem Program. I know quite a few of you, but not everyone. I'm going to suggest that we go around and do brief introductions, just our name, our affiliation, maybe interesting tidbit if you have ever fished for halibut or other marine species or not, and your role here today in the breakout room. So I do fish for halibut here in Humboldt when we're lucky enough for the fish to come up our way. And my role here is to facilitate our discussion today. And of course, I'm the program manager for the resource, so we are eager to hear feedback from everyone and help us determine what level of management is needed for the fishery. So I am going to, let's see if I think what might be best if I can try and get this participant list to show up. I can just call on folks that I see. So I'm going to go with Paul next. I'll go with department staff next, and then I'll call folks by name. So Paul, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Kirsten. I'm Paul Reilly. I'm a supervisor with the Marine Region out of Monterey, and I work directly with the Halibut Fishery. I have some great staff that collect a lot of excellent data, and Travis Tanaka and Christine Lacina, who are both with us today. One of the things I do a lot of is age halibut. If you have any questions about how old are halibut, how we determine age, feel free to ask that. But Travis and I have aged about 5,000 halibut ear bones since 2007. And I do a lot of review of documents and data analysis. And I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Why don't we go to Julia next?
Hi, everybody. I'm Julia Coates. I am with the department in our Santa Barbara office. I occupy a rather unique role in the Marine Region where my responsibilities are in stock assessment and other quantitative types of analysis across all of our Marine Region projects wherever the need may be. So I'm not dedicated to one particular fishery. I move around where the quantitative needs are. Recently, I have been working on the halibut stock assessment and management strategy evaluation.
Thanks, Julia. Why don't we go to Huff next?
Hey, everybody. Huff McGonigal with Fathom Consulting. I do a lot of fishing for halibut, not a lot of catching of halibut. A lot of other stuff in the process, but I always enjoy going out, and I'm helping represent Resources Legacy Fund, who is providing the funding to Strategic Earth to help facilitate the process.
Thank you, Huff. All right, how about Greg Helms?
Hi, everybody. Good to see familiar faces. Greg Helms here. I work with Ocean Conservancy. I work out of Santa Barbara, like a few of us here on this call. Halibut history. I grew up in the Santa Monica Bay, the South Bay as I call it, and actually participated in the Marina del Rey Halibut Derby at least 1 year in the 80s. My understanding is the famous MDR Halibut Derby is not a Halibut Derby anymore. It's a multi-species derby. ...
Thank you, Greg. Gilly, you're next.
Hi there. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see everybody. My name is Gilly Lyons. I'm with the Pew Charitable Trusts, And I'm just super excited that I know this series of webinars has been a long time in the making in terms of all of the COVID-related delays, et cetera. So it's just great to see it coming together. And I'm mostly here to definitely do a lot of listening and learning, and also just because Pew is very excited to see some additional, I guess, management attention paid to California halibut in terms of what might come next in terms of scaled management, whether it's an FMP or something else, and looking at opportunities to ensure it's as sustainable as possible across the board. So thanks so much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Noah?
Hi, everyone. I'm Noah Benaderet. I'm Ocean Protection Council's new Sustainable Fisheries and Aquaculture Program Manager. There's some familiar faces here and other people whose names I've seen and haven't really met yet. So hi to everybody. My background is sort of fisheries science, a lot of fish biology. Prior to joining OPC in April, I was at Southwest Fisheries Science Center doing a lot of life history work. So I feel the otolith pain. And yeah, I'm a pretty avid recreational angler. I guess there's evidence in the picture. So just mostly listening, kind of learning, getting a better handle on the process.
Great. Sorry about the cat. She's very insistent on getting some attention right now. How about Jeff?
Hi everyone. Sorry, my camera's not working today, so you'll have to enjoy the picture of up in the mountains. I'm Jeff Chester. I'm the California Campaign Director and Senior Scientist at Oceana, based out of Monterey, California. When I can, do some recreational fishing for halibut, although most of the halibut fishing that I was involved with was as an observer for my PhD over at Stanford University, studying the set gillnet fishery for halibut down off of Baja, California. So spent a lot of time with that fishery, and been working in various fisheries on the West Coast, both state and federal, for many years. And thank you to the department for putting this on. I think, as Gilly said, it has been a long time coming, and we're excited to participate and contribute.
That's great. Gary Burke?
Hi guys, Gary Burke out of Santa Barbara. I fish recreational and commercial, and I was part of the bycatch working group, and so I'm really concerned what's going to come out of this, and here to listen. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Gary. Andy?
Yeah, I'm a seafood producer out of Santa Barbara. I'm concerned with the way this is going to go. I think that, anyway, I'm going to listen to what you guys have to say.
Okay. And so, Julia, I see you have Sherry, but I don't see her on my screen. So hopefully she's still with us.
Yeah, she came in and then popped out. So I'll leave her there for now. But
okay. Did I miss anyone? Okay. Sounds good. Well, let me get to my notes, and we will, I'm just going to, housekeeping that we'll try, and we're small enough group that I think that we can do well with muting and unmuting ourselves when it's our turn to speak. And if not, I might just have to unmute, have to mute folks if I hear some background noise. So we're going to get started on our discussion questions. I noticed that sometimes our shared notes page kind of gets scrolled. I think it's because other folks are sharing the same page in their breakout rooms, but we'll try and make sure that we can still see it on the screen. Does anyone need me to zoom in at all? Does it look clear? I can try, and is this better for folks? Okay. All right. I see some nods. Sounds good. Okay. Navigating two screens with, oh, and of course there's my phone. Navigating with two screens and Zoom is quite the challenge. Okay. So let's dive in. So I'm just going to read off the breakout room discussion questions, and I'm going to let folks kind of raise their hand. You can just, wave to me, and we'll take turns speaking so we don't get jumbled on top of each other, and we'll just see how that works for us. So first question, how does California halibut contribute to your own personal livelihood? And I'll go ahead and kick it off. So as I mentioned, I will fish for halibut occasionally up here in Humboldt when the fish take advantage of the warm water moving up north. I have a good friend who is a fishing guide, so I will go out with him and contribute to his livelihood as a fishing guide. He's also a good friend from college, and his son and my son are close friends and in school together, so occasionally we'll just go out as families. And he's been teaching my son how to fish for halibut. So for me, it's both recreational, personal enjoyment, but then also at the same time, it's also a responsibility of mine as a civil servant to try and protect the resource and make sure it's sustainable and ensure that it's available for public use for not just myself and my family, but for everybody else. So, anybody want to go?
This is Gilly. I don't have a very good answer to this question at all, except to say that it is my favorite fish to eat. So that doesn't really contribute to my personal livelihood, but it can contribute to, or it's one of my favorite fish, I should say, but because Pacific halibut is in there too. But it contributes, I think, to my quality of life, if not my personal livelihood. So thank you to those that help provide that.
Yeah. Do you usually buy that fresh caught locally, Gilly?
Well, that's a good question, because I am, just in the interest of full disclosure, I'm calling in from Portland, Oregon. So it is something that we don't see as much up here. And Pacific halibut, yes, but less so California. But when it is occasionally available, it's exciting. And certainly when spending time in California, it's a treat.
Yep. Great.
Yeah, obviously this is Paul. This question was designed more for the consumptive groups, of course, but it doesn't mean that it can't indirectly contribute to your personal livelihood, and maybe that's what we're trying to get out here. For me, it's just a fascinating species, and I've worked with it now since 2007, and the more we know about it, the more we want to know, and there's so much information that we need, and we do a lot of guessing games. The part I'm familiar with is the aging and the life history and the statistics and the fishery. Of course, it helps provide my livelihood, since I'm a manager of that fishery, and I understand that fully, and keeping this fish sustainable is one of my major objectives in the department. And I've worked for the department for longer than I want to admit right now, right here, but it is important. So don't let the question prevent you from answering it in any way you wish to, everyone else.
Yep.
Thank you, Gilly.
I'll try to answer in two ways. Oh, sorry. I'll try to answer in two ways, given Paul's offer. I guess first is my family and I do eat quite a bit. We typically get our California halibut through a community-supported fishery project called Real Good Fish that works with a number of fishermen up and down the coast of California. It's definitely one of our favorites. It's definitely one of the few foods I can serve to all my family where everybody will eat it. Yeah, I think it's definitely one of our favorites for sure. And I think in terms of just livelihood and, paying the bills, I think, as a conservation NGO, part of my job is to work towards sustainable fisheries, which certainly halibut's an important one. So, my bills are paid by, the NGO that I work for Oceana, and that's a key part of our mission is to work towards sustainable fishing.
Thanks, Jeff. Anybody else want to share? Okay, let's move on to question 2. Now, I'll give Julia a second to finish typing. Are we good?
Good.
Okay. So based on the definition within the Marine Life Management Act, what does sustainability mean to you? And based on your experience, is California halibut a sustainable fishery? So getting a little bit more into the meat.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. This is Greg. My sense is that the Marine Life Management Act was really a big feature of it was aimed at broadening the definition of sustainable, really pointing at and highlighting sort of healthy, thriving ecosystems, or at least healthy ecosystems, and kind of a reaction to the limitations of single species management, for sort of failing to see the larger picture and so on. So it means obviously, continuous replenishment of the resource, as I think Kirsten read off in terms of the definition, but also incorporating those larger ecosystem pieces in it. And I've seen, just to go to the second part of the question, I'll preface this by saying I was surprised not having had access to the stock assessment report that I don't think we have, and sort of knowing what the 2011 stock assessment said, that I was surprised at the statement, written statement, that both northern and southern stocks are presumed broadly sustainable. I'll look forward to seeing kind of what information is there to back that up, when it becomes available. But I told you, there were the troubles in the South Bay with the halibut derby. We're talking about recreational halibut right now primarily, and that was a shot. That was a problem. Right around 11, I think it was just preceded the 2011 stock report. So cut to the chase. I'm not here to breathe fire into this situation, this process at the very beginning. My belief right now, and I'll be open to seeing more information, is that we ought to be setting halibut on a management path that grows the stock. I certainly agree with remarks, the goals stated about improving or seeing to the age structure and so on. But I think we know that, well, I represent a group of stakeholders who believe that 11 or 15 or 18% of original biomass is not good enough, and that recreational fishermen, commercial fishermen, and ecosystem considerations would benefit from a growing stock. Okay, so, and then number one, and number two, we're starting to see, and I'll finish here in a second, we're starting to see that halibut is highly variable based on environmental conditions. I'm a person that doesn't say, oh, it's vulnerable to environmental conditions. Therefore, we don't have to worry about the take, right? In fact, it means to me that we do have to worry about the take, and that the take should be scaled to the conditions of recruitment and reproduction in the stock. So I would bring in climates, low biomass, sort of meta maximum sustained yield types of considerations on stock status, and we should be on a we're too low, and we should be on a path to increasing the biomass, the spawning biomass of halibut.
Thank you, Greg. Anybody else want to weigh in on what sustainability means to them and whether or not they feel California halibut is sustainable?
Sure, I'll chime in. This is Jeff Schuster again. Yeah, I definitely wanted to echo what Greg previously said. Certainly agree with those elements. I think part of the way we're looking at the sustainability of the fishery overall is, particularly with the commercial sectors of the set gillnet and trawls, is that they are really multi-species fisheries with many bycatch species and many incidentally caught species. So we're looking at sustainability not just in the context of the halibut resource, but in the other species that are also caught incidentally in those fisheries. And we're drawing, I think, a lot from the ecological risk assessments that were conducted that essentially identified halibut as a priority, largely due to the high risk based on largely the bycatch issues associated with those two gear types. I think we're broadly of the opinion, based on the data that's out there, that the hook and line and spearfishing based methods of capture are pretty selective and have far less bycatch concerns. So generally view those methods as sustainable, but also would hope to make sure that the habitat impacts as well, particularly of the trawl sector, are addressed. And I think just generally, kind of along with the MLMA and how that's laid out in terms of sustainability definitions, making sure the target species, the bycatch, and the habitat impacts are all addressed is really kind of the critical for sustainability, and of course forward thinking in terms of making sure that we've got a climate ready fishery and we're anticipating the effects of climate change on the fishery as well.
Thank you, Jeff. I think that's a nice transition into the next question. If folks are ready to move on, I don't want to cut anybody off that wanted to speak to sustainability some more.
Kirsten, this is Gilly. I was just going to sort of plus one what Greg and Jeff have laid out here. I think they both encapsulated the sort of the larger, broader intersections really well. So I echo the echoes.
All right. Thank you, Gilly. Okay, let's transition to the next question, which, give me 1 second. Our screen just shifted. There we go. So how, if at all, is bycatch a concern for the California halibut fishery and or your livelihood? And just to remind folks, this is the recreational webinar. So we did talk, I did try and frame the definition of bycatch and how it incorporates the master plan, how it incorporates incidentals, and how it's a bit challenging to define bycatch in a recreational fishery. But let's see if folks want to share any thoughts related to bycatch.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll chime in and with the focus on the recreational elements. I mean, certainly the bycatch and of sublegal halibut is a concern for the resource. And I think we really want to make sure there's a differentiation made based on mortality rates, and the mortality rates of different gear types. Certainly concerned with gear types that have higher mortality rates may be affecting recreational fishing opportunities in the overall stock. And I think in terms of that incidental catch question that you raised, I mean, certainly discarding sublegal halibut, as required, that's certainly sort of one category. But in terms of other species, I think whether they're retained or discarded is probably the primary criteria that I would suggest looking at in terms of just whether each individual is primarily or just kind of looking at that overall in terms of percentage. Just
Thank you, Jeff. Gilly, I see your hand raised. Is that on purpose?
Yes, it was. So I guess I have sort of a question associated with this question, which is with respect to considering the focus on the recreational fishery. Is it safe to assume that the current bycatch assessment / analysis that's being conducted, I know that's sort of a broader look at maybe all sort of setnet and trawl fisheries statewide, and so obviously that doesn't really capture the very specific sector that we're discussing today. I was just wondering if there would be any sort of additional information coming forward in terms of analysis of I guess primarily sublegal fish, and perhaps any other sort of stragglers in the recreational sector, just to sort of have a larger sort of universe of information to look at. But I know it sounds like it's not part of the current inquiry necessarily. Okay.
Yeah, it's not part of the effort that we are partnering with Rick Starr and his group on. However, it is an area that we've identified in the department as needing more attention, and so Paul and Chuck's staff and our surf samplers are those that are out there trying to get as much information as they can on catch. And unfortunately, a lot of times we don't get information on sublegal and discards unless we are physically on the CPFE or party boats and can document that. So it is definitely a challenge for us to get that type of data.
Gilly, this is Paul. We had a small study about 10 years ago now that Travis Tanaka did on taking hook and line caught halibut and putting them in a tank in Aquarium of the Pacific in San Francisco and looking at their post-release mortality. And we didn't have a large sample size, but what he found was that the handling of the halibut was the most significant factor in the mortality rate. If they were dropped on the deck, if they were picked up with a large mesh net, which could cause fin splitting, and if the hook was released, of course, safely, those are different factors. And what we've tried to do since then is to educate anglers, recreational anglers, about the proper techniques in releasing sublegal halibut, because in the long run, that will ultimately help the fishery in keeping the recruits at a lower discard mortality rate.
Great, thank you so much. That's super helpful to hear.
Yeah, just and real quick, I just remembered Paul kind of reminded me about a study that Oceana and the Monterey Bay Sanctuary worked on together to characterize the hook and line commercial fishery, which obviously is not the recreational fishery, but there may be some similarities based on gear type, and that documented various bycatch rates of other species besides halibut as well. So I think it is important in looking at what's acceptable bycatch and what we're looking at to actually have some apples to apples comparisons so that we can actually look at the different bycatch species bycatch by gear type. So that information gap of identifying what the bycatch is, and so it can be compared to the ones that Rick Starr is looking at, is important. And I'd be happy to provide you that study that characterized the fishery here in Monterey Bay.
I'm just curious, Jeff, how did you obtain data on commercial hook and line bycatch?
It was through basically onboard observation of fishers. So basically, it was through onboard observations.
Okay, and it was just in Monterey Bay.
Yeah, I was just with some fishermen that fished out of the Santa Cruz Harbor in Monterey Bay.
Okay. Was there a report from that available?
Yeah, that's what I was offering to share. I'll go ahead and share that with Strategic Earth and you and Kirsten and the team. Kirsten and the team.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. All right, I see Greg, you have your hand up.
Yeah. I think it's pretty obvious that bycatch is going to be it's going to be a major issue, and it'll be maybe a new experience for a lot of us or all of us to get in. It seems to me it's going to be a big subject. It's going to take a lot of finesse to just to manage the different terms that are coming out and make sure that the balance is struck. That the need for the finesse and the problems that could come from doing a quick and dirty job here, combined with that graph showing the amount of take by the recreational sector and all the sectors that are out there, to me are factors that weigh heavily towards a complex FMP. Just to answer the unasked question about the pause, and if we worked ourselves out of, look, I just as soon go to ESR plus. That would be my preference for every fishery. That said, with all the sectors and I remember Milton Love giving a presentation to us in do people still say the aughts, back in the early 2000s, saying, watch out, you guys, you look in, you peel back the onion, you're going to find recreation is a much higher proportion. Anyway, with that, and the need for a very thorough job on bycatch, the sustainability problems, we're going to need a complex FMP, as much as I hate to say it. So maybe I'll leave it at that meta comment, knowing that we're almost out of time.
Thank you, Greg. Yes, we just got the warning that we have just about 10 minutes left. So why don't we move on to climate change? So how, if at all, are changing ocean conditions in the past 20 years or so impacting the California halibut fishery and or your livelihood? So I can say that at least for me, for the past now going on 5 years, California halibut has come up into Humboldt Bay on warm water conditions and allowed for fishery to happen here locally. So that's something that I guess is a positive about climate change, and that they tend to be heading further north than they have historically, consistently over the years. I think there were some pulses maybe early 2000s. Paul probably knows this better than I.
Yes.
But that's given me an opportunity to actually fish for halibut and take my kids out. So that's been a positive thing that I've seen in terms of changing ocean conditions. Anybody else want to just share? Paul, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about San Francisco Bay and how it's changed, if you've seen major changes over time with changing ocean conditions and climate change?
Yeah, we've seen heavy recruitment, as many people know, in the San Francisco Bay area in the last decade, particularly with some strong year classes. We had a pulse in 2008 and 9, which was also reflected in a mini pulse up in Eureka at that time. Then Eureka had no commercial landings for 5 years in a row. And then since 2017, they've had more landings than they've had prior to that. And this is the commercial fishery. And San Francisco Bay has had the highest catch rates and catches total of recreational halibut in memory. And that's because of strong recruitment, which we think is tied to warmer water use. As you know, we had the blob in 2015-16, the warm water event, which was detrimental to many species, but it seemed to be favorable for halibut. And as a result, we're seeing super strong recruitment, but it's cyclical because now we're seeing it drop because of more normal colder temperatures, and that will mean less recruitment into the fishery in the next few years. So it seems to be on a 10 to 12 year cycle. But prior to 1980, Central California was not a significant part of California halibut landings. And there's been a significant shift in the last 40 years now to Central California. I don't want to belabor that, but
yeah,
okay.
That's good. Thanks, Paul. Gilly, I see your hand up.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I was, that was very interesting to hear. And I was just going to say that, I mean, of course, climate change is changing everything for everyone all the time in ways that we're always sort of scrambling to understand. And that there will, I'm sure, be all sorts of emerging impacts on food web dynamics and predator-prey relationships as they pertain to halibut in both directions, up and down. But also it does sound like maybe just some of the stuff that like we're hearing just from, ambiently and like the scientists are looking at is that maybe warming waters might not be a bad thing for halibut. So for California halibut, I don't know, maybe that's too sweeping of a statement to make, probably so, but just that there may actually be, a slightly more positive correlation there. And so that's, not to say that we want more of anything bad, but just the fact that it may not be a disastrous situation as it can be for other species might be, something to at least look at.
Yep. There are some winners and losers when it comes to changing ocean conditions. Greg?
Yeah, it does seem like, climate and warming waters is going to bring some perceived winners or some perceived, it may have the effect of spreading access to halibut around a little bit. I'm presuming that that the trawl fishery is limited to the California trawl grounds and that Northern California fishing is primarily hook and line or set net. I don't know that.
No, that's not true, Greg. There's actually more trawl landings in Central California than in the California halibut trawl grounds.
Okay, I have a lot
just
to learn.
Not many vessels are involved. We have less than 20 vessels statewide that have significant halibut landings each year.
Gotcha. Well, I look forward to learning more about that. It does seem, though, I'll be quick, the halibut dynamics are, well, they're becoming dynamic and changing. And I noticed that we have we almost have a size sex season, traditional old school fishery management, but there is no season. And, Paul, if I'm wrong about that, I'll quickly learn. But so yeah, it seems like a little more dynamism in the way we manage halibut would be called for, given the dynamics that are in the fishery that we maybe haven't had in the past. That was supposed to be short.
Thank you, Greg. I saw Gary raise it, kind of wave to us. Would you like to unmute, Gary?
Sure. I wanted to ask Paul a question here. I get reports the Bay, San Francisco, is just going nuts with halibut. And I wondered how much, did you consider this being a COVID year? I mean, sport boats have been bought up, guys aren't working. And so, I imagine the Bay is just packed with people. I see it even down here. Nobody's working, everybody's out fishing. You look at the bluefin fishery, it's going on down in Southern California. I mean, guys, I hear guys going, doesn't anybody work? It's Tuesday. What are you guys doing out? Everybody's out fishing. So you see that, must be that in the Bay too.
Well, there's been a shift in catch rate, Gary, the last couple of years, and that it has gone down from the big peak of 2019, which was the highest catch for recreational anglers in Central California in history. So now we're seeing that year class cycling through and becoming older and less abundant. So the reports we're getting are boats are trying, but they're not nearly as successful as they were several years ago for halibut in the Bay.
Thanks, Gary and Paul. Go ahead, Noah. Did you raise your hand?
Yeah, couldn't find the button fast enough. But just a quick question for Paul as well, and I think sort of echoing the previous one, is that do you see, if there's, I'm not sure if all the 2020 data is available yet, but do you see a spike in effort during that time? Like, even though you're getting maybe smaller year class returns and smaller.
Yeah, I don't have that data either, Noah. And I know COVID did impact angling effort, both pros and cons, depending on if you're fishing from boat launch ramps that were closed. You couldn't get out at all, of course, in part of the year. But then if you had nothing else to do and you wanted to do something, people took to fishing. So I don't know what the data will show. I don't think it will show as high a catch in 2020 as it did in 2019.
Thanks.
Okay, I think in the interest of time, we'll move to our last question before we get kicked back to the larger group. So based on your understanding of the halibut fishery, do you have recommendations related to the sustainability of the resource, bycatch, habitat, climate change, and or socioeconomics? So we are all ears.
I wouldn't say any specific recommendations at this point, but certainly I think just in terms of particularly addressing some of the bycatch concerns, just wanted to make sure that, kind of the full suite of tools are on the table, from, gear modifications to performance standards and caps, time area closures, limits to tow duration and soak time to reduce mortality, transitions to hook and line, similar to what was done with spot prawns, moving from trawl to trap. So just wanted to make sure, at least at this point, all the options are kind of on the table, and we can kind of figure out, based on the bycatch analysis, what would be the most effective in for each sector of the fishery.
Thanks, Jeff. Yep, Greg, you have about 10 seconds if you want to weigh in.
No, I failed to put my hand down.
Oh,
Thank you, though.
I see Gilly gave